Hi, Trish.
Ketchup crew.
Hi,
Hi,
Ketchup
Ketchup.
Crew.
I feel like I should do story time at my parents' house more. This wall just matches my aesthetic. Like maybe
Yeah,
I
no,
should
I was just about to say that. Like, where are you today? It's such a perfect lyric background.
Thank you. It's also extremely Jewish. Even this really old Siddur matches. Like the little jewels in it match, which is cool. This was my great grandmother's potentially. It was definitely my great grandma's mother's and potentially one more generation before that.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I'm at my parents for the afternoon, so Alex can have time at home alone because that never fucking happens. And luckily, my parents like to spend time on their own because they're always busy babysitting and genuinely don't feel at all offended when I'm like, cool, do you mind if I ditch you for an hour to go hear a story with my friends?
That's awesome.
Yeah, my parents are definitely quite self-sufficient. And I think when I went down at the very start of the pandemic, like the next morning, I was kind of like, oh, there's other people in the house. And they both just got on with their own shit. And I was like, oh, okay, that's how it is. That's fine. And I think if it had been different, it would have become like overbearing to be there for so long. But I think on the first day, I was a little bit like taken aback that they just kind of kept on with their normal, quite separate like day things that they were doing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I would have found it overwhelming if they were trying to guest me.
Yeah, for that length of time, it's just not feasible.
No, I'm like, you want to feel like you can relax in your own home.
Totally.
How are you doing, Bracken?
Oh, it's so warm. It's uncomfortably for me warm. Yeah. Just tired. It was a day off today, and yeah, my brain doesn't know how to have days off anymore, because if I sit down for too long in the morning, then my brain's like, nope, you're depressed now. So I need to go outside and do the walking around, and yeah. I just want to be able to rest on a day off, you know? But brain says no. That's something the brain says now.
I feel that.
My brain doesn't do well not doing stuff. Like that's partly why I do lots of exercise and like regular stuff, because I need to.
Yeah.
But yeah, it doesn't take long. Like Alan's like, you're a bit grumpy, shall we go for a walk? Yeah, I mean that will help. Like I'm too grumpy to want to go for the walk, but I will reluctantly start the walk because I know that it'll be better afterwards.
Yeah, totally. But in that moment, it's just like, I don't want to do fucking anything. I want to lie here and not do anything. But brain will punish me for this. Like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Fucking sucks, man. I just want to sit down and watch Vampire Diaries all day.
Okay, no, right? I actually the other day was having one of those days where I just wanted to watch TV all day and do nothing, but my brain really didn't want to let me. So I kept switching between things I was doing while watching TV. So for a while there, I was sitting and then I was like, okay, maybe I can chop a vegetable and I'll have it with dinner later. And will that make my brain feel slightly better? Okay, not better enough. And then I started stretching while watching and I was like, no, brain, you're going to shut the fuck up. And you're not going to think about your problems for a day. You're going to be distracted by trashy romance. Got it?
Yeah.
So I generally think my brain's pretty nice to me, but all of that is very relatable. Like I took up a whole hobby so that I could have something to do while watching TV. So I would sometimes sit still long enough to watch telly with Alan. That's what knitting's been really good for that.
Fair.
Awesome. Once you get to the stage where you don't have to look at it as much, I imagine it would be useful.
Yeah, you can't really. I don't think I can knit and watch something with subtitles. But I'm slightly better at sitting still through something with subtitles because you have to pay more attention. But before I used to be like, 2 whole hours? You can't ask me to commit to the next 2 whole hours. There's so much time to sit still for.
Yeah.
As someone with ADHD, that's very relatable. Halfway through a movie, I need to take a break. I often will watch movies over the course of multiple days, like it's an episodic TV series or something. Yeah, I don't do all of that either. I sometimes deliberately turn on subtitles so that I pay better attention.
I just do TV in the background if I'm on like TV that I watch on my own, and like I've always done other stuff while watching TV. And like as a teenager, didn't really sit down, like didn't make it through films very much.
So it's story time right now. Smaller crowd than usual. Boutique.
Ooh. If you want, we can wait another 2 minutes to see if anyone shows up. But if you want to just get going, I'm also okay with that.
Yeah, we can wait a couple more minutes if you want.
I get my knitting.
I'm really
Storytime has been
enjoying.
good for chores though. I used to do a lot of washing up when Frankie was reading, like tidying the kitchen and washing up.
Bina, before you run away though, you need to know that you've got that kind of tealy, greeny blue color going on as well as white, and I feel like you color coordinate Bracken and I right now.
Oh yeah, I'm like the middle ground.
Yeah, it's
This
very
is my
aesthetic.
pretend sports bra, not really a sports bra because it isn't fitted to like cup size. It's just like a stretchy pullover thing, which is not a sports bra. If you are above, I don't know, definitely not up at an EF cup. So, but it's very comfy.
That's good.
Yeah.
Comfort is
Yeah, it doesn't support me at all. But it's really comfy. Right, one sec.
I'm so excited to see what's going to happen next with this. I'm like, cool. So she pissed everyone off. And where did we leave off last night?
We just, she walked into a room full of medical dudes and was like, I want to join your school, but you're all wrong for this long list of reasons. Also, menstruation. Whoa.
That was the best fucking scene. I'm just trying to remember like the precise end point.
Well, she ran out and she was very unhappy and she was crying in the street, and Monty was like, well, that didn't go to plan. And that's where we left off. So, shall we start up again? Monty, you dumb twink. All right. Well, are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. Well, Monty says at last. Then again, well, that didn't go quite as planned. It went exactly as I planned, I say. My voice is snapped like a rib cracking. Really? This was your ideal scenario. I said what I wanted to. I snatched my muff from him and shoved my hands into it. Every point I made is irrefutable. Their exclusionary policies rest entirely on the fragility of their own masculinity, but it doesn't matter because they're men and I'm a woman, so it's not even going to be a fight, and it was never going to be a fight. It was always going to be them walking all over me, and I was stupid to think it could ever be anything more than that. And don't you dare try to hug me. His arms, which had been rising, freeze midair, and he lets them hover there like he's carrying something large and round and invisible. I wasn't going to. I swiped the back of my hand over my eyes, knocking my spectacles askew. I want so badly to be away from here, but I've got nowhere to run to. Not back to their flat, too small for me to have a good private cry. Even the fact that it's their flat reminds me how much more together my brother's life is than mine. Not back to Edinburgh, into the arms of a man who smells like bread and aniseed and says he likes me for my spirit, but wants it broken just enough that he can take me out in public. Not back to my parents' house, where I grew up unacknowledged by anyone unless it was to voice some disapproval for the way I dressed and spoke and brought books with me to parties. For all my efforts, I haven't even a bed of my own to throw myself upon to sob. Miss Montague, someone behind me says, and I turn too quickly, for a tear rips itself loose from my eye and sets a course down my cheek. One of the governors is standing behind me, the man with the ill-fitting wig who gave me an eyebrow wiggle at the mention of Dr. Platt. His cloak is thrown over his arm and he's breathing fast, a bit of a wheeze to his lungs that sounds like a lingering winter cold. I can feel that tear sitting against the corner of my mouth, and I'm not certain if wiping it away will make its presence more or less noticeable, so I leave it there. Good day, sir. He scrubs his hands together, an uncertain gesture that seems to be both an attempt to generate warmth and also just something to do. That was quite a scene, he says, and my heart sinks. You don't have to put it like that, mate, Monty interrupts. He's reaching out for me again, like he intends to put a protective brotherly arm around my shoulders. I glare at him, and he turns it into brushing some invisible dust off my arm. My apologies. The governor extends a hand to me. Dr. William Jesselden. Oh. In spite of how sour I'm feeling towards all men in medicine, I go a bit light-headed at hearing the name. I've read your paper on lithotomy. Have you? He looked surprised, as though my entire presentation in the Great Hall was a fabrication. What did you think of it? I think your method is undeniably better for removing bladder stones, I reply, then add, but I wonder why you wouldn't devote more energy to the study of how to reduce the occurrence altogether rather than removing them once they've already caused pain. He stares at me, his mouth slightly open and his head canting to the side. I'm ready to turn and walk away, nursing the satisfaction that I was able to tell off at least one of the St. Bart's governors. But then he smiles. You subscribe to Alexander Platt's School of Preventative Medicine. Emphatically, I reply, though I've had very little chance to apply anything practically. Of course. He slaps his gloves against his palm, then says, I wanted to offer you my apologies for the ungentlemanly way you were treated just now. Some men seem to think that if a lady behaves in a way that they consider unbecoming of her sex, they are justified in speaking in a way that is unbecoming of theirs. So first, my apologies. I nod, not sure what more I can say other than thank you. Second, I wish to offer you a few suggestions. Suggestions, I repeat. If your heart is set upon studying medicine, you might seek an apprenticeship with a herbalist or a midwife. I'm not interested in either of those subjects. But they are, he drags out his thought with a hum through pursed lips, then finishes, adjacent to medicine. So is body snatching, and yet you aren't suggesting I become a grave robber. The tip of his nose is going red from the cold. Perhaps employment as a nurse at the hospital then. They're always looking for young women here, and at Bethlehem. I'd be happy to put in a word. I fold my arms. You mean spooning soup into mouths of invalids and sweeping up the wards after the surgeons walk through it. I had not woken today thinking I would get in an argument with a famous physician, but if I wanted to cook for men, I'd have stayed in Edinburgh and married Callum. I don't want to be a midwife or a nurse. So you're determined to be a lady doctor then, he says. No, sir, I reply. I'm determined to become a doctor. The matter of my sex I would prefer to be incidental rather than an amendment. He sighs, though it comes out round with a chuckle. It's a shame you weren't here a few weeks ago, Miss Montague. I would have handed you off to Alexander Platt. You two would get on famously. Even knowing that it is anatomically impossible in relation to my continued state of living, I swear my heart actually stops. Alexander Platt, as in the author of Treatise on the Anatomy of Human Bones. As in Alexander Platt, my idol, the working class surgeon among all these wigged fops who man the hospitals. Alexander Platt, who was discharged from his post as a Navy surgeon for his tireless campaign for anatomical dissections to better understand what killed men at the sea. Alexander Platt, who cut his teeth and dirtied his hands walking hospital wards in the French Antilles before he even was allowed to set foot in an Edinburgh hospital. Alexander Platt, whose work on arsenic poisoning earned him a spot as a visiting lecturer in Padua when he was just 22. Alexander Platt, who had proved one did not need money or a title to be a physician, just a good brain and a determination to use it. Cheselden beams. The same. He was here last month. Giving lectures, I ask. No, it's a rather unfortunate situation. He had his license suspended several years ago and, well, it's all a very sticky business. He laughs, too high, his eyes darting away from mine before he finishes. But he was here seeking hands for an expedition he's undertaking. He left on an expedition, I ask, and it comes out pinched by disappointment. Not yet. He's gone to the continent to be married. He sets off for the Barbary States on the 1st of the month to complete some research. You should write to him and say I recommended you. He's less likely to be put off by your sex than the men here in London. He's taken on work with women before. Of course he has, I want to shout. He's Dr. Alexander Platt, and I have excellent taste in idols. Do you know where I might write him? He's staying with his intended and her family in Stuttgart. The uncle's name is Hoffman, and the bride is... Give me a moment, it will come to me. Josephine? No, that's not it. Joan? He runs a hand over his chin. Something beginning with a J and an O. My joy turns bloated and sick. When the name of one's only childhood friend is brought up unexpectedly, years' worth of memories you vowed to rid yourself of entirely bob to the surface. Particularly when that friendship ended as poorly as ours did. Joanna, I squeak, hoping he'll say otherwise. But he snaps his fingers. Yes, exactly that. Joanna Hoffman. Very clever of you. Of course. Of course, another felled tree blocks my path. Of course, the woman marrying Dr. Platt is the last person who'd want to welcome me into her home. Oblivious to my strife, Cheselden goes on. You might write to Dr. Platt via Miss Hoffman. I know he's intending to set out as soon as the wedding is finished, so you may be too late, but you've no loss dropping a line. When's the wedding? I ask. 3 weeks from Sunday. Perhaps a bit optimistic for a letter to arrive by then. It is almost impossible that, in such a short time, my letter could find its way to Dr. Platt, and he would find time amid marriage and planning an expedition to read it, and he would be so taken with my written plea alone that he would offer me a position, and I would then have enough time to travel to wherever he was leaving from and make his acquaintance. An even slimmer chance that any letter bearing my name would not immediately be ripped to shreds by Joanna Hoffman, a girl with whom I have a checkered history, as expansive as the list of names upon the wall in the Great Hall. But if it wasn't a letter who showed up on his doorstep, but rather me in the passionate, intelligent flesh, then I might have more of a chance. Dr. Cheselden fishes in his coat pocket for a calling card and hands it to me. Do tell Alex I advised you to write him. I will, sir, thank you. And Miss Montague, the very best of luck to you. He touches 2 fingers to his forehead, then turns down the street, his coat collar turned up against the wind. I wait until he's out of sight before I spin to face Monty and grab his arm, though he's so bundled I mostly get a handful of sweater. Look at that! I told you all went according to my plan. Monty is looking far less enthusiastic than I anticipated. I had even been willing to let him hug me had he offered, but instead he's rubbing the back of his neck with a frown. That was something. Try not to sound too excited. He was bloody patronising to you. Much less than anyone else was. And he gave me a card. I waved the creamy stop engraved with Cheselden's name and office addressed to him. And told me how to write to Dr. Platt, the Dr. Alexander Platt. You know I was telling you about him yesterday at breakfast. The one who lost his license to practice surgery, he says. Because he's a radical, I reply. He doesn't think like the other doctors. I'm certain that's why. Monty scuffs his toe against the pavement, eyes downcast. I press the card between my hands like I'm praying over it. I'm going to Stuttgart. I have to meet him. What was that? Monty's head snaps up. What happened to writing? A letter will not get his attention in the way I need to, I reply. I'm going to show up and introduce myself, and he'll be taken with me and offer me the position. You think you're just going to show up on his doorstep and he's going to hire you? No, I'm going to go to the wedding and dazzle him with my exceptional promise and work ethic, and then he will hire me. And, I add, though I know this trail is more treacherous, I know Joanna Hoffman. You remember her, don't you? Of course I do, he replies, but I didn't think you two parted on good terms. So we had a small falling out, I say with a flippant wave to undercut the grandness of this understatement. Doesn't mean it won't seem perfectly innocent for me to show up at her wedding. We're friends. I'm celebrating with her. And how will you pay your way there? He asks. Travel is expensive. London is expensive. Is Dr. Platt going to pay you for this work? Because as much as Percy and I adore you, sharing our bed is not a long-term living arrangement I am thrilled about. If he had a job for you that was studying medicine or working towards some kind of degree or license, that would be one thing, but it sounds like you'd be taken advantage of. Well, maybe I'm going to let him take advantage of me. Not like... I blow out a sharp breath, and it comes out wispy and white against the cold air. You know what I mean. Come on, Felly. Monty reaches out for my hand, but I pull away. You're too smart for that. Then what am I supposed to do? I cry, and it comes out ferocious. I can't give up on medicine, and I can't go back to Edinburgh, and I can't marry Callum. I just can't. The only reason I'm not crying is that I'm so aggravated by the fact that I'm almost crying again. I haven't cried in ages. Even those first grey, lonely weeks in Edinburgh, I had been stiff-lipped and stout-hearted. But in the space of a single hour, I've been on the verge of it 3 times. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life hiding the things I love behind the covers of books that aren't considered appropriate for my sex. I want this too much to not try every last thing possible to make it happen. Fine, now you may hug me. He does. It is not my favourite. But if he can't understand the hurt, I can at least let him apply a familiar balm. I stand in his arms, my cheek pressed against the scratchy wool of his coat, and let myself be held. Everyone wants things, Monty says. Everyone's got hunger like that. It passes, or it gets easier to live with. It stops eating you up inside. I scrunch my nose and sniff. Maybe everyone has hunger like this, impossible, insatiable, but all-consuming in spite of it all. Maybe the desert dreams of spilling rivers, valleys of a view. Maybe that hunger will one day pass. But if it does, I will be left shelled and halved and hollowed out. Who can live like that? By the next evening, Monty and I have descended from civilized point and counterpoint to full-on bickering on the subject of my going to Stuttgart. It is our only topic of conversation as the three of us walk to the pub in Shadwell called the Minced Nancy, which from the name alone brands itself a place where Mollies like my brother and his beau can be together openly. We're supping with Scipio and his sailors, whom Monty and Percy have been conspiring for a reunion with since the crew docked several weeks previous. The pavement is narrow, and we walk with me squashed between Monty and Percy, all of us tripping over one another in an attempt to huddle against the cold, and also avoid being mowed over by carts. The air reeks of burning pitch from the riverside, so strong I'll be swallowing the smell all night. Soot falls in great clumps as London sets everything that burns aflame to keep warm. Lacking coinage to spare for a lamplighter, our only illumination comes from the spitting spray off the knife grinders' wheels and the blacksmiths stamping out their embers for the day as we pass their shops. By the time we find the address, I'm so tired of being cold and wet and hearing my brother's infuriatingly sensible arguments about why I should not go to Stuttgart on a whim, that I'm ready to turn around and return to the flat as soon as we arrive. I expect the club will be crowded, loud and reeking of booze, but it feels more like a coffee house, dark and warm, with oyster shells littering the floor so that the boards sparkle and crack under our boots. A thin veneer of smoke hangs in the air, but it's a sweet tobacco and welcome relief from the sludgy evening outside. The noise is mostly conversation at a level volume, combined with a soft clatter of cutlery on plates. There's a man with a theremin sitting on the bar, his feet up as he tunes the strings. You chose this place, I ask Monty, as I look around. Your taste has gotten far more civil than I last saw you. No one's got their top off. Please don't compliment me on my morals. It makes me feel very obsolete. He's put on his best coat for the occasion, a coat he apparently could not spare for accompanying me to the hospital, and his face is washed. It's an approximation of looking presentable, though he still looks less like a gentleman and more like the raw ore mined to create one. It's just that I can't hear a bloody thing if it's noisier than this. There's Scipio. Percy waves, and I follow his gaze to the familiar crowd in one corner. Monty fumbles for Percy's hand, and I follow them across the room. Privateering suits the crew of the Altheria. They are all better dressed and less gaunt than the last time I saw them. Most of them still sport sailors' beards, but their cheeks don't valley beneath them anymore. The ranks have shifted. I know Scipio, Ibrahim, and King George, now a whole foot taller, but just as enamoured with Percy, as proven by his sprint across the room and tackle hug. But with them are two other dark-skinned men I don't recognise, one with a curled moustache and gold earring, the other with 3 fingers missing on his left hand. There's a third, much smaller and smooth-faced person in a shapeless tunic and headscarf, so hunched over a mug that I can't immediately tell if they're a man or a woman. Scipio claps Monty and Percy warmly on their backs and gives Monty's newly shorn hair an affectionate ruffle before he takes my hand in both and kisses him. Felicity Montague, what are you doing here? Did you come all the way from Scotland just to see us? Before I have a chance to answer, he asks, and have you grown taller, or am I shorter than when we last met? She's not, it's those damn boots of hers. Monty slings himself into the booth beside Ibrahim. They've got the thickest soles I've ever seen. He's sore I'm taller than him, I say. Scipio laughs through his nose. He's lost several inches in cutting that hair. Don't. Monty claps a hand to his heart in reverence. I'm still in mourning. You've got a new crew. Percy reaches down to shake hands with the 2 men I don't recognise, then slides into the booth beside Monty, unfolding his long legs under the table, while I take the chair across from them. We needed more hands sooner than expected, Scipio says. This is Zaire and Tumelo, picked up from the tobacco trade in Portugal. And that, he points down to the slouching youth at the end of the table, is Sim, from Algiers, who adopted a legitimate life to join us. Sim looks up from her beer. Her face is heart-shaped and small, made even more pointed by the frame of her headscarf. Her features seem almost too large for such a small canvas. The two men stand to shake hands around, but she doesn't move. How have you found sailing as merchants under the British Crown? Percy asks as we all settle into the booth. Sepio laughs. I am of a far calmer temperament than I was when we sailed without patronage. We're still questioned more than most British crews when we're on European soil, but at least we have letters now. Where have you been travelling? I ask. Still in the Mediterranean mostly, he replies. Portugal and Algiers and Tunis and Alexandria. It's all dead cargo. Your uncle's kept us away from the Royal African Company, he says to Percy. We saw him in Liverpool last month and he seemed very well. Percy smiles. Percy's aunt and uncle, though ready to see him committed to an asylum, were far from tyrants. His uncle had been gracious in using his position to aid the crew of the Eleftherias as thanks for their role they played in our safety while abroad. In contrast, Monty and I had each written one letter to our father, letting him know only that we were not deceased, but also not coming home, and received nothing in return. While my father had been hostile to Monty and indifferent to me, he was the sort of man who would have cut off his own hand if it meant avoiding scandal. And two children mysteriously disappearing on the same trip to the continent would have all the bees buzzing back in Cheshire. Oh, tell Felicity the story about the goats in Tunis, Monty demands, though I'm spared by the distraction of Georgie returning with the beer. Have you been corresponding? I asked Scipio. I know Percy organised this reunion, but not that there has been much more communication between them. On occasion, Scipio replies. Here, Miss Montague, you and Sim may have something in common, Ibrahim interrupts and calls down the table. Sim, what do you think of London? She raises her head. Her face doesn't change, but I can feel the rehearsed nature of this bit, and she has been called upon to do it more than once and is growing tired. I hate it. Why do you hate it? He goads. Too many white men, she replies. Ibrahim laughs. Sim doesn't. Across the table, she meets my eyes, and some invisible string seems to tighten between us. Her head cants to the side as she inspects me. It makes me feel like a specimen pinned open on a corkboard for students to study. I'm given an excuse to look away when Scipio says to me, How have you taken to the north? Percy said you'd been in Scotland. She's already tired of Scotland, Monty answers. To compensate for his deafness, he's taken to either staring with off-putting intensity at whoever he's speaking to, or turning away so his good ear is towards them. I know it's necessary for his hearing, but the latter makes it look as though he isn't paying attention, magnifying the already dismissive air he's prone to giving off. I shouldn't be annoyed by it, but I'm an easily stoked fire tonight. Monty pokes me in the ribs with his elbow. Maybe Scipio will take you to the continent. When I don't smile, Scipio looks between us. Are you travelling again? No, Monty is being cruel, I say. I'm not being cruel, he protests. It was an honest suggestion. You've got no other means of travel. I glare at him. And you know Stuttgart is entirely landlocked, don't you? I do now, he says into his beer. Across from me, Sim's head snaps up. She has both fists resting on the table, knuckles notched into each other, her thumbs pressed into a steeple. What business is taking you to Stuttgart? Ibrahim asks. I let out a heavier sigh than I mean to, and my spectacles fog. My friend Joanna Hoffman is getting married. It seems the simplest explanation, but leave it to Monty to show off the dirty underside of everything. She wants to go to Stuttgart because her friend is marrying a famous doctor Felicity's obsessed with and wants to work for. I am not obsessed with Alexander Platt, I snap. She's been turned down by every other surgeon and hospital in Edinburgh. She doesn't have any money or way to travel, but she's still ready to go gallivanting off because Dr. Cheeseden told her that this Platt fellow is theoretically, possibly, maybe hiring a secretary. Monty looks to Sepio. Tell her it's a terrible idea. I want to kick Monty under the table, but there are so many legs tangled up, I'm afraid I'd misjudge and dig an unwarranted toe into an innocent stander-by. It is not a terrible idea, I snap before Scipio can answer him. And it's Cheselden, not Cheeseden. Do you have any opposition to oysters and eggs for supper? Scipio calls down the table, interrupting Monty and me before we can properly show our claws. Georgie, come help me carry plates. As soon as they've gone, and Ibrahim has turned down to converse with the other two men, I give my brother a hard stare. I would have tossed that mug of warm beer in his face if I hadn't suspected. I'd soon need it, and I am no great lover of oysters. In return, he adopts a wide-eyed innocence. What's that look for? I lean in, my tone clipped as a fingernail. First, you don't have to be a smug prick about the fact that I don't have any money or means to travel, or that I was barred from the hospital, because in spite of what you and Callum and everyone else seems to want, I am not going to give up and settle down. Second, you are not in control of my actions simply because you are the closest man to me. What I do is not up to you, nor to anyone, particularly someone so ignorant of the difficulties of my current position. And third, Monty, that's my leg. The ascent his foot had been making up my thigh halts. Percy peers under the table, where his legs are stretched out parallel to mine, then pats his own knee. Is this what you're after? Monty flops backward into the booth, raising a puff of dust from the upholstery. You can't be serious about travelling, Thel. It's insane. No more than giving up your inheritance to live as a skillless sod in London, I snap. You're a professional card player, remember? You're not curing cholera. Stop it, both of you, Percy interrupts, a hand going up over the table between us like he's refereeing a boxing match. This is meant to be a nice evening, and you're ruining it. There's a pause. Then he says to Monty with a frown, My legs aren't actually thinner than Felicity's, are they? Oh, stop it, Percy. You know you have magnificent calves, Monty says, then adds, and Felicity has very hairy socks. Magnificent calves, I scoff. Could you have picked a less erogenous body part? It was an unwise door to open. For Percy pipes up. Monty has nice shoulders. Monty pillows his cheek upon his fist in a swoon. Do you really think so, darling? You think he's got deep dimples in his cheeks? Percy says to me. You should see his shoulders. Here I thought nothing could inflate my brother's head more. I swear his chest actually puffs up. I'm no great lover of this mealy beer, but I take a drink just for the drama of it before I reply, I pray nightly I never again have occasion to see my brother's bare shoulders. Come on now. Monty knocks his foot into mine, then peers beneath the table to make sure he's aimed correctly this time. If you're going to be a doctor, you mustn't be shy about human anatomy. It's not human anatomy that makes me queasy, it's your anatomy. My anatomy is excellent, he replies. Yes, it is, Percy adds, pressing his lips to Monty's jawline, just below his earlobe. Dear God, stop! I resist the urge to cover my eyes. You're still in public, you know. Monty drags himself away from Percy and gives me a saccharine smile. Felicity, darling, you know we love you dearly and are so very delighted that you're staying with us for the time being, but it does place some limitations upon the sort of, shall we say, activities that we are accustomed to engaging in, both frequently and privately. Stop talking now, I interrupt, and go find a back room somewhere and suck each other's faces off. Monty grins, his hands suspiciously out of sight beneath the table. That's not what I intend to be sucking. You are the filthiest creature on God's green earth, I tell him. Percy wraps an arm around Monty's shoulder and pulls him into his chest. Their vast height difference is only slightly less comical when they are seated. Isn't it adorable? The roguish grin goes wider. I told you I'm adorable. They slink off together, though slink is far too sheepish a word for it, as there's absolutely nothing sheepish about it. They strut, hand in hand and tripping over each other in delight, obnoxiously proud to be in love. Scipio and Georgie return with food, neither of them asking where the gents disappeared to, thank God. I don't eat much or talk. Scipio asks a few gentle questions about how I'm doing, but my answers must be brisk and simple enough that he knows I'm not in the mood. By the end of the meal, I'm sitting alone at the edge of the group, picking at the cracked white paint on the tabletop and wishing Monty weren't so right. It's mad to go to Stuttgart alone. More than mad, it's impossible. I have almost no money, certainly not enough to get to the continent. And what would I do once I arrived? What does one say to a friend who broke your heart? Hello, remember me? We were young together and used to collect bugs in jars and broke chicken bones for supper so we could practice setting them. But then you called me a pig in a party dress in front of all your new friends, and I said you were shallow and uninteresting. Congratulations on your union. May I talk to your husband about a job? I sink down in my seat without meaning to, one hand sliding into my pocket and fiddling with the edges of my list. Someone sits down at the table across from me, and I look up, expecting Monty and Percy returned from their backroom romp. It's Sim. In spite of the trousers and loose shirt, she's far more feminine looking in close proximity. The bones of her face are fine and elegant in the lamplight. She doesn't say anything, and I'm not sure what it is she wants from me. We stare at each other for a moment, both of us waiting for the other to speak. Am I interrupting your sulking? She says at last. I'm not sulking, I reply, though I very clearly was. So your posture is always that terrible. Her English has the same accent as Ibrahim's. He was raised speaking Darja in the Marrakesh before being kidnapped and sold into slavery by the American colonies. Before I can reply, she presses on. You want to go to Stuttgart. I throw my hands up, a gesture that nearly overturns my mug. Good, so everyone overheard that. No one overheard it, she said. We just heard it. Your brother speaks very loudly. He's deaf, I say, then add, and obnoxious. Her face doesn't change. I want to take you. Take me where? To the continent. The continent? To Stuttgart. She pauses, then says, do you want to repeat that as well? Her tone snaps with impatience that I can't keep up, as though she's proposing something as casual as paying a call together, though I might have been flummoxed even if her choice of conversation had been more conventional, for her eyes are very dark and very intense and they've got me fumbling for an answer. You want to go there, she says slowly, tapping a finger on the table between us. I want to take you. You want to... Why? You know Joanna Hoffman, and you're invited to her wedding. None of that answers my question. I'm almost definitely not invited to the wedding, but a correction would overturn a complicated grave, so I ask, I'm sorry, who are you? Oh, do we need to make some preliminaries? She holds a hand over the table, which I don't take. I'm Sim. I work for Scipio. I almost roll my eyes. Well, now that the niceties are out of the way, I can do more, she says. The weather's cold. Ibrahim thinks it's funny to hear me say there are too many white men in London. You should wash your hair more. Excuse me? Your braid fell in your beer when you were slouching. She folds her hand upon the table with a nod, satisfied with the perfunctory chat. I'm Sim. You're Felicity. I want to take you to Germany. If she's joking, I can't tell. Her face is impossible to read, those enormous eyes offering no hints. I'm more accustomed to Monty, who can't make a jape without congratulating himself. Why do you want to take me to Germany? I ask again. Her boot knocks my shin under the table, and I'm annoyed that it's me who moves to give her room. Because I need to go to the Hoffman house, and it will be easier if I have you to help me. Why do you need to get to the Hoffmans? It doesn't matter. No, actually, that matters quite a lot to me. I sit up straighter and match her folded hands upon the table. If you're going there to say, as what I hope is an extreme example, murder someone or set the house on fire, I'd rather not be complicit in that. Your introduction from the captain included mention of sailing legitimately, which implies that you once didn't. A flash of irritation breaks over her face, just for a moment, but enough for me to think that this stoic facade may be just that. She's working very hard to appear much cooler and tougher than she actually is. Like she hopes that will balance out the fact that she's ripped open and vulnerable in asking me for this. I'm not murdering anyone. And yet you're silent about arson. I'll pay your way, all your expenses to Stuttgart. The Elftheria's payout was good. I can prove it if you want. All I ask is that you let me pretend to be your maid so that the Hoffmans will put us up in the house. You can do what you like while we're there. Go to the wedding or accost that man you're obsessed with. I'm not obsessed. And I promise, no one will be in danger or hurt. She sucks in her cheeks, making a hard, unflattering face. The lamp on the table turns her skin the bright amber of monarch wings. You can trust me. I'm one of Scipio's crew. You're a sailor, I say. What does a sailor want with an English family abroad? I'm trying to remember if Joanna's family has any connection to trade or sailing. But by the time her father died and she left England to live with her uncle, we were seeing as little as possible of each other. Sim works her mouth into a hard line, then, with great care, says, to reclaim something that was taken from my family. So you're a thief? That's not what I said. Reclaim is just theft in fancy dress. It's not theft, she says. There is an item that belonged to my family, and I believe it's now in possession of the Hoffmans. All I want is a location. The Hoffmans are an upstanding family, I say. Joanna's father was an aristocrat, and her uncle's a businessman. What sort of dealings would they have with... I trail off, but Sim finishes for me. With someone like me. With common sailors, I say. What's this mysterious item of unknown location? Is it treasure? She stares down at the table, digging her thumb into a chip of white paint until it snaps free. More like a birthright. That's a very abstract concept you're stealing. All right. You're not interested. I'm finished. She stands to go, but almost before I realize I've spoken, the word "wait" tumbles from me. She pauses, her chin to her shoulder so that her headscarf obscures most of her face. This is a bad idea, and I know it. Humans have instincts, specifically for situations like this. Everything in me is saying there is danger lurking in this forest, eyes bright and hungry through the dark. I want to walk in anyway. Because it's Alexander Platt. It's medical schooling. It's a chance to plant my feet firmly in a direction away from Callum and wifedom and general gentility. What does it matter to me what clandestine mission is drawing her to the same house as me? She's just a bank with credit to travel. I'm doing nothing wrong so long as she doesn't. If we go, I say, you are there only for a location. You have to promise me there won't be a theft or damage or harm done to any person or item. I won't let you into their house just to make a robbery of it. That's my condition. I said I wouldn't steal anything. Promise me. Why are you so certain I'm villainous? Because the alternative is that you're simply doing a good turn for a stranger, and your initial approach would lead me to believe otherwise. I have suppressed enough eye rolls in my lifetime to know she's working very hard to do so. I promise. We'd have to leave soon, I tell her. The wedding is in 3 weeks. Even as I say it, it hardly feels enough time, particularly if we're travelling on limited funds. There's a chance we'll arrive only to find Dr. Platt and Joanna have already traded their vows and are now cozied up in some honeymoon suite leagues away. Arriving uninvited to a wedding is one thing. Bursting in on a honeymoon is quite another. I'm ready to leave whenever you are, she replies. Will you be missed? She shakes her head. And you won't tell my brother? Does that mean you're in? She holds out a hand again, and this time I take it. I expect a firm shake, but instead she pulls me up so that we're nose to nose. She's a few inches taller than I am, thin but powerful. Perhaps those hungry eyes are hers. Perhaps I don't care. Yes, I say, and it feels like a step off a cliff. My pulse flutters with the free fall. I'm in.
Is Hungry Eyes some foreshadowing? Because that song was in Dirty Dancing, wasn't it? Yeah. Because seriously, I ship it. I ship them on a ship. I ship them on a ship together.
I feel like we don't even need to ship them because it's obviously going to happen.
Her dark eyes. Her dark eyes.
The dark, hungry eyes.
Hungry eyes.
This book is so cute. It's just so cute how they are obnoxiously proud to be in love. Oh,
I'm just reading the chat now. Aww.
Yeah, I mean, like herbalists and midwives are like fucking awesome. I mean, I know she wants to be a doctor, and yes, but herbalists and midwives are fucking awesome.
True story.
Yeah, though I will say that midwife here does mean something completely different. So like they can be helpful, but they also don't necessarily have any medical training. So, you know,
What?
midwife. Oh yeah, midwives in North America are like kind of the hippie style midwives rather than the people who actually deliver babies.
Oh wow.
And they don't actually have to go through any kind of medical training. So they go through doula training and that kind of stuff.
And that's today as opposed to the 18th century.
Yeah.
Oh, I definitely thought we were talking about the 18th century.
Yeah, in the UK, you apply to be a midwife in the same way as you would apply to be a nurse, and that's like what, 5 years training or something to be a nurse or to be a midwife.
Yeah, so here you go through medical school and it's all obstetricians.
And also, like, I mean, if I ever want to have a kid, like, I want to have a midwife. Like, I don't want to have a doctor. I want to have a midwife. I mean, honestly, the idea of giving birth in a hospital and like that whole environment and everything and all of the hurt that can happen there, is just no.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Wait, do you have any, I was going to start the goodbye to the catch-up crew, but do you have any advice for the catch-up crew today, Bracken?
Okay, catch-up crew. Good luck No.
I hope that you find an extremely attractive person with dark, hungry eyes to go on a mystic voyage to a continent with.
Proud and to be in love with.
Yeah,
that's
to go to the continent.
That's so much better. That's so much better.
Goodbye, Ketchup Crew. Love you.
Bye, Ketchup Crew.